Hi, how are you?
Well, good morning, friends. Welcome to Trezevant Hall, to our conversation this morning, the Parish Hall Forum. For those joining us online, Living Charitably with Rick Shadyac. We are glad to have him with us, and recently retired, as it were, from his duties, but we'll get to hear more about his story. Again, thank you for your presence. If you have any phones and devices that ring or buzz, if you'll just put them in the silent position so that we can begin our time with the prayer. The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Let us pray. Almighty God, whose loving hand has given us all that we possess, grant us grace that we may honor you with our substance, and remembering the account which we must one day give, may be faithful stewards of your bounty. Thank you for the gift of Grace St. Luke's, and for communities of faith and agencies of support and outreach and justice that help in the process of healing and restoring your people. Thank you for this day when Rick Shadyac joins us to reflect on his ministry. May we be so encouraged in our own ministry and to your service. Amen.
Amen.
Let us welcome Rick Shadyac.
Thank y'all. Thank you, guys.
So we'll begin with some conversation time, and then when it's time for questions, there's a microphone just here. If you'll simply go to the microphone and ask those questions, I think we should have time before our end. But again, welcome.
Thank you, Father.
Thanks. So Rick, I appreciate that you have taken time to be with us. I was thinking about the fact that I've had 2 occasions to be your guest for events of ALSAC, and it was a real privilege. I had not been there in that capacity before. Once during the pandemic, I was invited to offer some words of meditation to the team of ALSAC, and I felt very honored to do that. And then at a board meeting, to just be in that community. And over the years, I've learned so much. So just I want to say thank you.
The thanks go to you, Father. Yeah. You did it, okay? Yeah. So, and I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
And I know our parish, for like so many places, appreciates the work that has taken place through ALSAC and St. Jude, and we'll talk about that for a moment. But I'm thinking about the fact that you were serving as the president and CEO until March 1st, so you are now in a new season, and my microphone is going out, but you can still hear me, right? Is that important? How's it going? You know, the old thing, as it were, is when you retired, things change, but then also some people say they haven't retired. They're just changing what they're doing. So
it's a new chapter of life, and I'm not retiring. It's not in my DNA to retire. I've got way too much energy to retire. So I've agreed to consult back to St. Jude for a year. So I've started doing that. I've traveled a little bit and taken studying a little bit, and I've got working on a few things about my next chapter in life, but there's more to come.
Right. So you're not sleeping later and all the things that, and slowing down.
The only good thing is I'm getting to exercise a heck of a lot more, which I'm really enjoying. So that's been fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, so I mean, you see the words ALSAC, you hear the words ALSAC, and as I was thinking, American Lebanese Syrian Associated Charities.
Yeah.
But I've never researched how it received its name. And I talk with people all the time. They say, what does that mean? Where does that name come from? And then they say, how is it connected to St. Jude? So tell us about the acronym. Tell us a bit about the history of the word ALSAC. and then how it relates to St. Jude, because it seems complex. It may be simpler. I don't know.
It's actually pretty simple. So our founder, Danny Thomas, was Lebanese, and Danny Thomas ultimately became a very successful actor, comedian, television producer. And when he was kind of down on his luck, he walked into a church. He was Catholic, and he walked into a church and he prayed to St. Jude Thaddeus, the patron saint of hopeless cases. And he was at a point in his life where he didn't have enough money to pay a medical bill to get his wife out of the hospital. They were getting ready to have Marlo Thomas. And he prayed to St. Jude, basically, help me find my way in life, and I'll build you a shrine. Basically, he was saying, should I get a real job or should I pursue my passion as a comedian? And truth be told, he got a job literally the next day as a singing toothbrush on the radio. There was no television back then. And he got enough money to be able to pay that bill, got his wife out of the hospital, and he viewed that as a sign. And unlike a lot of people that we get in desperate situations, Father, right? And we pray to God and just get me out of this and help me through this. And then we don't remember sometimes what we said that we would do in return. Well, Danny Thomas remembered that. So he decided that he wanted to somehow honor God and his heritage. And he created ALSAC, which is American Lebanese Syrian Associated Charities. And back in those days, there were clubs. So the Lebanese and the Syrians hung around together, and they had Lebanese Syrian American clubs, they called them back then. And Danny Thomas went around the country asking people that were of the same heritage as him to help him form ALSAC for the sole purpose of creating St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I'm very proud to say that one of those persons were my mother and father, who were Lebanese. My father was a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and my parents had just had me back in the 1950s, and Danny showed up. My dad was asked to put together a couple of people in a bowling alley in Washington, D.C. Danny Thomas and this other gentleman, the first CEO of ALSAC, Mike Tamer, showed up. And they said they wanted to get the community together to build St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And the idea was kind of crazy. It was far-fetched. But my dad said he asked one question. He said, why are we going to do this and why in Memphis, Tennessee? And Danny said, look, we're going to do this to say thank you to God and the United States of America for giving our parents, their parents, my grandparents, the opportunity to come to this country and to make a life from Lebanon and Syria. Lebanon was part of Syria, it was greater Syria back in the day. And Memphis was chosen because it was a segregated city. And Danny Thomas wanted to address healthcare inequity, primarily in the black community. And I'm so proud that they opened St. Jude in 1962 in a segregated city, welcomed kids from all races, creeds, religions, and took away all the economic circumstances so that everyone would be treated exactly the same. And you fast forward, and here we are today, and St. Jude leads the way the world understands, treats, and defeats childhood cancer. And we've stayed true to that foundational promise for well over 60 years that no family will ever receive a bill from St. Jude, not for treatment, travel, housing, or food, so mom and dad can focus on helping their child live. And that's because of all of you, the public that has chosen to embrace St. Jude, to contribute to St. Jude, and it's incredible what's become. I would just say this too, and this is not, I'm not trying to brag at all, but I mean, American Lebanese Syrian Associated Charities is the largest healthcare charity in the world. American Lebanese Syrian Associated Charities is the largest cash charity in the world. I don't think Danny Thomas or my father, who was one of the CEOs at ALSAC, I don't think we could ever have imagined that, right? But that's what ALSAC is. And I'm so proud of that. And I think, Father, it always comes down to the purity of the mission. I think people just gravitate to the purity of this mission, which we've stayed true for over 60 years.
Well, it truly is a remarkable story. If you get into the depths of it, I may use this handheld.
That's okay. They probably would. My mic didn't work.
So Testing, 1, 2, 3. It's okay.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, things happen. Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
All is well.
All is well.
Thank you. So, anyway, so thinking about it's an incredible story. I mean, it goes to the work of ALSAC, of St. Jude, the impact that it makes. And I was thinking about the fact that from 2000. So I've been, of course, that's remarkable on so many levels, as you've already alluded to. And any takeaways and what it has become, but some things that were highlights, lowlights,
Yeah.
takeaways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I always think about the why behind the quadrupling. Okay, so why did we quadruple our revenue? To impact more and more kids. Okay, we did figure out a way to quadruple our revenue. So when I started, we were raising about $650 million a year, which is a lot of money, right? But as I stepped down, we were raising over $2.7 billion. And that allowed us to see over 8,600 kids a year. It allowed us to expand our mission globally. St. Jude is now doing work in over 80 countries. It allowed us to now provide free cancer medications to 120,000 of the 400,000 children around the world that are going to get cancer. And I said, free? Okay. And these are in countries that typically would not get quality chemotherapy drugs or other cancer medications and on a regular schedule, which is so critical to help these kids survive childhood cancer. I think about the ways that we've been able to reduce the toxicity of cancer treatments so that kids have a chance to grow up and lead a more normal and healthy life, adult life. I think about the number of kids that had cancer now that are able to have children, and I always call that like double miracle. So we save the child, the doctor saved the child, but then the child is able to then have another child. That's a double miracle in my mind, because back when we started, that didn't happen because it was so toxic. They were not able to have kids in most instances. And I also worry all the time about cognitive function. And we know that many of the kids that had brain tumors and even some that had leukemia, they were getting their bodies fully radiated, for instance, okay? And that included the brain, and that could impair cognitive function. So we've changed all those therapies, and kids now are able to thrive and lead a full and complete life, just like many of us have been blessed to lead a healthy life. And that's the why. That's why you quadruple, so that you can affect kids all over the world, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and in the United States as well, and give these kids an opportunity to live out their hopes and dreams. Yeah. Lowlights. Well, Father, I attend a lot of funerals. Unfortunately, cancer remains the leading cause of death by disease in U.S. kids today. And when you get asked to speak at a funeral of a young child, it's one of the toughest things on the planet to be able to do. Especially the ones that they ask me, these are families that I've gotten to know. But I also know how hard those kids tried to survive cancer, how much they put into it. And I think, but for the grace of God, that could have been one of my children. I'm blessed to have two healthy kids. My wonderful wife of 43 years is here with me today. We've got two great kids. And I think about all that they were robbed of. And so that we just have to do better. And even though we've made incredible progress, like I said, it's still the leading cause of death by disease in U.S. kids today. And then when I think about expanding our aperture to think about the world here, the survival rates in low and low middle income countries for pediatric cancer are 20% or less. So 4 in 5 kids are going to still pass away. In the United States, 4 in 5 kids are going to survive, and that's not good enough. So there's just so much work to do, right? But the lowlights are, seeing these kids struggle, seeing kids that still have to get amputations, and all the pain and struggles that they go through as part of cancer treatment. Yes, Father.
Well, thank you. So, in advance of our time, I did reach out to your office and said, would you be willing to sort of describe living charitably? And I'd like to just read what you shared with me. Each of us has the ability to help others and support causes we believe in through a variety of ways. We can live charitably in our daily lives through words, small acts of social good, and giving that inspire others to act with kindness and compassion. Everyone can have a role in creating positive change, piece by piece, in the world today and impact the next generation. And so, will you unpack that more, talk more about that? Because giving in some ways is instinctive, many times if it's someone we know, right, to our family, to our friends, the things closest to us. But then when you think about the work and the impact of ALSAC, people are giving for all sorts of reasons. Yeah. How do you talk about that concept of living charitably just as a way of being and going about daily life? How does that unfold?
Well, thank you for asking me about that. This is something that I'm deeply passionate about, and it's something that we developed, a concept that we developed toward the end of my tenure at St. Jude. In 16 years as the CEO, I've had to make a lot of asks. Okay, so I'm not ashamed. Danny Thomas used to say he was a proud beggar, and I was lucky enough to be able to meet him and understood what he meant when you become a proud beggar. But I started thinking about that a little broader, Father, and it didn't feel really inclusive. Okay, a CEO's constantly asking for money, but not everybody can contribute. Not everybody is in that station of their life where they have the ability to contribute. But everybody has the ability to serve, okay, to live charitably if they can't give charitably, right? So, I love some of the Dr. King. I study Dr. King, and he was assassinated on my birthday, and that was something. My 11th birthday was when Dr. King was assassinated, and as a selfish 11-year-old, I kind of wondered why the whole world was like mourning. And in Washington D.C., where I grew up and lived for 50 years before I came to Memphis, the city was burning. Okay, and I didn't understand it, and then I learned and studied all about Dr. King, and he says life's most compelling and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And that's something that's kind of guided me throughout my time at ALSAC and St. Jude. So I just wanted to say to, especially to younger people, I want to challenge you to live charitably, to do random acts of kindness, to show compassion, to call your mother or father when you're in college, when you're not really excited about doing that, okay? To go visit your grandmother, to buy a cup of coffee for someone that may be behind you and strike up a conversation, to simply hold the door open when we're walking into church, or it can be anything. And then just if you can volunteer. And I saw, I see the Reverend in the back here that led a beautiful service this morning, and you talked about preparing Easter baskets, okay? And again, I understand that involves money, but there are other, you do that. And when I say to people, when you serve, I'm going to ask you a question. I bet you all of you have served. I won't ask you to raise your hands. How do you feel after you get done serving? How do you feel? You feel pretty good, right? So what's that telling us? It's good for us to serve. And then those of us that are blessed to have kids, if we model that behavior, if we take our kids with us as we're serving a meal at a homeless shelter, okay, think about what that is going to mean, that experience is going to mean for our kids. And if we have a conversation afterwards about that, and they're going to model that behavior, right? So I think if we all did that, I think that the world could be literally transformed. And it's not the easiest world to be living in today. So I just think that if we all took a little bit more, mine might be going out here too, to think about others instead of just ourselves, I think that actually it could be magic. So that's why I'm so passionate about living charitably, not just giving charitably. Giving is part of living charitably if you're able, because not everybody is able. So that's kind of where I am, and that's what I want to talk about in this next chapter of my life. And I've been blessed to be able to be asked to be on some podcasts and some other things that I'm going to do and speak and things like that. That was a long answer, though. I gotta cut it down.
No, thank you. So, just thinking about the funding that is received, because it is very clear that there is to be no bill for that family.
Yeah.
And all that undertake, all that comes from that, and all of the funding sources, which are very diverse. And as we look at our current circumstances and social, political, and funding, and where funds are being withheld, and all of the things that are happening, and how that impacts so much, particularly in nonprofit organizations, right? What does that look like? How has that impacted ALSAC? How has some of the things, because there are a lot of labels that are associated with ALSAC, St. Jude, even in the name ALSAC.
Sure.
Right? You have, clearly.
We're Arabs, okay?
Right.
We're Arabs. I'm proud to be Lebanese. I'm proud to
Right.
be an Arab.
So you had an institution that clearly has,
Yeah.
a name in it, and then St. Jude being that which is, of course, religious.
Correct.
Speak for a moment about some of the challenges or the creativity that has had to become a part of the work, mindful of that, so that the mission, you're able to stay focused in the way that you have intended.
Look, I think it always comes back to the mission. And so, people will say, what is this ALSAC? And I'll proudly tell them what ALSAC is. And we exist solely to support St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. There's nothing, ALSAC cannot grant a penny to another institution. All of the money that we raise goes to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I proudly tell people that there would be no St. Jude Children's Research Hospital but for ALSAC. ALSAC gave birth to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Do people say things about it being Lebanese and Syrian? The answer is absolutely yes. But I'm not going to back down. I am who I am. God put me on this earth to be who I am. And my founder was Lebanese. My parents are Lebanese. They were very proud Lebanese. And I think this is something that we ought to be proud of. This is our way of honoring our heritage, honoring God and this country. So I think all of us sometimes we should be proud of who we are, but get back to that mission again. That's why I think people gravitate toward it if they're not enamored with what's going on in the Middle East or whatever. I'm not either, okay? But at the end of the day, it comes back to the mission. Look, this is a difficult climate that we're living in today, and I'm not going to get political here, but at the end of the day, St. Jude receives federal grants, okay? Those grants are in jeopardy right now. And other institutions all across the United States, their funding is being threatened at this point in time. I hope and pray that that's rethought, but if it's not rethought, then I also hope and pray that private philanthropy steps up. There's a lot of money in foundations and donor-advised funds, and I do believe that goodness will prevail and that ultimately we will continue to take care of problems in the United States and also problems all around the world. I think what's going on with USAID is very scary. These are, soft power is also important power, but there's a morality behind all of this. And I worry. I talked to a CEO that you all know, Emily Callahan, who's now one of the best hires I've ever made. She's a CEO of Feed the Children. And she was telling me about the disruption in some of their funding right now and the challenges that they've had in certain parts of the world to provide meals, just basic things like that have been cut. That's just not right. And that's what we all have to keep in mind. Behind every one of these dollars that's allegedly being cut, there's also human beings. And I know I'm getting a little political, but those are real lives, folks. Those are real lives. We have to remember that. It's not just dollars. Those are lives. That's how I look at the funds that we raise. Those are real lives that we're able to impact because people give up their hard-earned dollars.
Well, thank you for that. It's something that's its own minds of people in this room, people everywhere, because of funding and all of the services and houses of worship, the work that we do, our members, people of other religions, other traditions, finding ways to give, to do what we can through the outreach in the parishes and the justice ministries in parishes to close the gap in some of the ways. And some places are creative in what that looks like, and some not so much. And so we continue to explore those things here. I'm thinking about the feeling that the giver has. You know, you talk about how does it feel when we give, and if you had a favorite story, and in your career you have so many stories, right, where the giving has taken place, but a particular story that resonates with how giving affects the giver. If you had just that one story that you would be willing to share, that it comes to you maybe more than other stories.
Yeah, there's a ton I could tell you about, but the the most fulfilling, I'm pretty loud too, but I'm happy to take it. The most fulfilling was always when I dealt with kids. And these kids literally handed him to me and said, they call me Mr. Rick at St. Jude. Mr. Rick, will you give this to a really sick kid? And then I looked at him and we exchanged some words and I told him how beautiful it was. But to see that child light up, that child lit up and they were so happy and so proud. And then also to see the mom and the dad that were standing on either side of that child. And to see the joy and beauty. I mean, there were tears, but they were tears of joy, right? These are little kids that want to help other little kids. I mean, that to me is just the most beautiful thing on the planet. And it happened regularly, you guys. It happened regularly. That's the beauty of this mission. And I had so many families that would tell me, the St. Jude families come from all over the United States and the world. They're not just Memphians, okay? They come from everywhere. And they would constantly say to me, I can't believe that random strangers are paying for our medical bills or allowing us to stay at Domino'sville. Why do they do that? And I just said, because they love you, okay? And then, you see the joy and the burdens that are lifted off of people. I mean, I want us all to think about what it would be like, God forbid, if any of us had a cancer diagnosis with a child in our lives, and how devastating that is, because these moms and dads tell me about that all the time. But when they come to St. Jude, to not have to worry about all of the financial burdens so that people can really and truly focus on their family and getting that child better, it's just this huge relief. And that's because of all of you. It's because of the way the public has chosen to embrace St. Jude. That's the beauty of it all. But there's so many stories about people that you just see how wonderful they are and how happy they become when they give.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I suspect our audience has some questions, and so I will roam with the microphone. If you'll raise your hand, I'll come to you. A small question or a big question? Questions you may have. Very eager group here. Okay.
I just happen to, the length of your term in service for St. Jude's is kind of firmly imprinted. It's such a long and fruitful journey. We happen to be from Chattanooga visiting today, and one of the pharmacies that we go to, we got to know the pharmacist there, and he happened to be a St. Jude's baby. And so looking at him, I think he's somewhere in his 50s now.
Wow.
Comes back here every year. Part of his program is to help continue the research based on his tenure there, and to realize his life has been extended by 50 years, and what he's doing as a part of the give back to help others really just strikes at my heart to realize that. So
Love it.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Chattanooga's a great city. Just think about this, folks. Kids lose an average of 70 life years to cancer. 70 life years to cancer. Adults still not acceptable, but it's 14, 15 years. Yet only 4% of the federal cancer budget for cancer research is dedicated to kids. 4%. That's all. St. Jude fills in that gap. That's why our name is in St. Jude Children's Hospital. It's St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and well over 50% of what we do is actually dedicated to finding cures. So we have to fill in that gap because the government's not going to do it, farmers not going to do it because the customer base is too small. Would you rather cater to a customer base from 19 to 80 or from 0 to 18? I think the answer is probably pretty obvious.
Laura, hi. Laura Geddes. It's, again, so good to have you here.
Thank you, Reverend.
I was hoping actually to continue the conversation, but perhaps in a bit of a different way, particularly though on how you meet the children from wherever they are. And I had the experience of eating in the cafeteria at St. Jude, and just that simple but meaningful experience of eating together. I wonder if you could share a little bit about what the hope in the created community is, the food that gets to be there and people get to eat, and how people gather there. Would you mind doing that?
No, of course. Thank you, Reverend. So for the longest time, Danny Thomas only wanted a single cafeteria. And we had tried to stay true to that. Now we obviously had to create a few ancillary eating options because there's almost 8,000 people that work on the campus, and then families and contractors. And so you get a sense that you can't all eat in a single space. But look, folks, people come to St. Jude. They're not there, for a day or a couple of hours. They're there for weeks and months and years on end. So we're a community. And we genuinely believe that we should do as much together as possible. So we do eat together, and we try to meet the needs of what kind of food people would like, depending on all across the world. I mean, our cafeteria workers, our chefs are going to make the food for whatever ethnic background, culture you may come from, because we want to make sure that you feel comfortable. We live together, right? We have housing facilities, and they're beautiful housing facilities. And so that means that they're together a lot. We play games together. We celebrate holidays together. We celebrate birthdays together. We celebrate birthdays of the brothers and the sisters that may not be in cancer treatment, because that's important. We celebrate education together. We have a school. We want our kids to go to school. And we do all sorts of fun activities. And this is all done for a sense of normalcy, so that these kids feel like they actually, can have a life outside of being in cancer treatment. We have a tremendous emphasis on music and creativity, art. We have a lot of art programs. We do a lot of things with our service dogs, and then we have doggy days where volunteers can come in and bring dogs to help with the kids. So we try to create this sense of community. We play bingo together. This is something that I think to see a family from a foreign country try to understand bingo, it's actually really interesting and fun to watch. But they quickly learn some of our games, and I think it's just a beautiful experience. I would just say one other thing too. Our patient population is a reflection of the world, right? And not everybody that comes to St. Jude is educated the same way that maybe we are here in the United States, or maybe even some families in the United States. And to see some of the moms and dads really reach out to these families to try to teach their children, it's actually so beautiful to watch, because they're bonded together by this common enemy that is cancer. But they also want their kids to have that chance to learn, or to maybe learn a musical instrument. It's a beautiful thing to see, and how they kind of all work together and come together. I kind of say that when you're at Target House or you're at Domino's Village, it's kind of like the UN, okay? Except people actually talk to each other. So it's really it's a beautiful thing. So thank you for asking, Reverend. It's a really cool place. Michael Heisley, the former owner of the Grizzlies, he said to me one time, he asked me to come speak at something, and he said, I just want everybody to know, whenever I go to St. Jude, and he went to church. He was a devout Catholic, okay? He went to church every single day. He said, I never feel closer to God than when I'm on the St. Jude campus. I just think that's so beautiful, and that's how I've felt for the many years that I've been coming to St. Jude.
So we have another question.
It's my understanding that St. Jude freely and readily shares research with any healthcare institution anywhere. I'm wondering, is there any chance of that act of giving to spread throughout the medical profession and the research labs around the world, rather than using that as a way to generate revenue for additional research? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so look, we protect our intellectual property as well. But here's the difference, okay? So if somebody wants to use our discoveries for commercial purposes, we ask that some of that money come back to St. Jude so that we can reinvest that in our mission. But in terms of our protocols, we freely give those away to hospitals all across the United States. We educate and train the global pediatric clinical workforce, literally all around the world. Some of you, I think, are involved in the global program, and it's a remarkable program. So we literally bring people from all across the world to Memphis. We pay for them to travel here. We put them up in hotels, and we educate and train them so that they can then go back to their countries and to take care of their kids. We do the same thing, folks. ALSAC does the same things with their foundations. So we bring in their leaders and teach them how to fundraise and how to market. We teach them good governance. We help them set up their boards and things like that. And we pay for all of those things. So I would love to see that happen, sir. But, just like with the healthcare system, we don't charge, obviously, but that's never going to change, right? Because it's a for-profit model here in the United States. We can have a great debate about whether or not that's a good model or it's not a good model. But at the end of the day, I don't think that that's going away. It's certainly not going away anytime soon. But I do know that there's a lot of kids that don't get what they need because of insurance reasons. And there was one time President Clinton came here not too long ago, and I've had the privilege of getting to know him, and he wanted to learn a little bit about our model, and I loaded up an iPad and actually sent it to him because I knew he was a voracious reader. And one of the studies that he picked out was done by Dr. Pui, who's a world-renowned pediatric oncologist in the leukemia space, and he had just made a finding that kids, African-American kids, had the same chance at surviving childhood cancer at St. Jude, but not if they were treated elsewhere. Okay, and President Clinton wanted to understand why the survival rates were the same at St. Jude, but not necessarily elsewhere. And Dr. Pui said very, very simply, we're going to take resources completely out of the equation. And if I need to call a specialty doctor in Seattle, Washington, or I need to order a second MRI, I'm going to do it regardless of whether the insurance company is going to pay for it, because the public is going to help us take care of that child. And that's why our survival rates are higher than everywhere else, because we take out all of that nonsense. And it is nonsense when you think about it, okay? And President Clinton looked at him and he said, that's how healthcare should be practiced everywhere. And I believe that.
We have another question here.
8,500 patients last year.
Yes,
Where
sir.
do they come from and how do they get to you?
They come from all over the United States and the world, literally. They come to us following a protocol. So you have to be referred to St. Jude, first of all, okay? You can't just walk in. We don't have an emergency room, for instance, okay? So you have to have a disease that we treat. So we are a specialty children's hospital. You're not going to come to St. Jude if you have a broken arm or, God forbid, your child has autism. That's not what we do, right? So we're a pediatric cancer hospital, diseases of the blood, infectious diseases, things of that nature, pediatric neurological diseases. Ideally, you're eligible for a research protocol that we have. Ideally, you don't have to be, but that is one of the things, because we are a research hospital. We want to check whether or not the protocols that we have are effective and improving survival rates. And then you have to be willing to make the time commitment. So you remember, I mean, this is it's pretty disruptive, right? If you can get treated for leukemia, which has a survival rate of 94% now, and you don't have a particularly rare strand or type of it, you may want to be treated at your local children's hospital, okay? Because this is a commitment of months and years on end, and it can be incredibly disruptive to families. Now, we try to make that as non-disruptive as possible by housing in schools and things like that, but still, it is disruptive. So when you put all that together, that's how the population of St. Jude ultimately is formed. But we do see about 8,600 kids a year, and then we do free consultations to kids all across the world, thousands of consultations, and we do not charge for those. So a child at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia or Boston Children's, that doctor can call St. Jude, ask, send the medical records, the doctors will review it, give the consult, and we do not charge for that either.
So we have time for one more question, Oliver.
Thank you for being here.
Privilege,
I
sir.
want to start off by thanking you and St. Jude from the bottom of my heart for standing by our golf tournament. I still think of it as the Danny Thomas Open.
Yeah.
Here's my question.
Yes, sir.
Could you talk a little bit about
Yeah. Yeah, we have one of the largest sickle cell programs literally in the world. So the first grant that St. Jude ever received was for sickle cell disease. It wasn't for pediatric cancer. I think that a lot of people don't know that. And we've got some really, really cool things that are happening right now. So we were the first institution to cure sickle cell disease through a bone marrow transplant. That child had cancer, and then when the child went through bone marrow transplant treatment, it also took away the cancer, believe it or not. That's not the easiest way to try to cure sickle cell disease because bone marrow transplants are difficult. Remember, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, so I got to be careful about how far I go into some of these things. But we are now, sickle cell disease is caused by a single mutation of a gene. So cancer that's much more complex than that. So there's now some gene therapies that are being developed that can actually target that single mutation. That they are very optimistic can ultimately lead to a cure for sickle cell. Those are being developed at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital as we speak here. But there's also been wonderful drugs that have also been developed that help to ward off the pain crises that are associated with sickle cell disease. So lots of great work that's done, and we take care of the sickle cell community in the Memphis area, but also some nationally as well. The challenge, folks, is kids do pretty well because we take care of everything for them, but when they graduate and they have to go into adulthood, unfortunately, they don't always take care of themselves the same way, and they get involved in a different medical system. And unfortunately, the average life expectancy is in their 50s, obviously, so they're losing decades of life to sickle cell disease. So we have to do much better in developing therapies, but also that transition of care from pediatric care to adult care.
Well, thank you so much for just the richness of the work that you do and for your tenure there and all of the ways that you continue to inspire and encourage, and the notion of living charitably. It's a lot for us to take with us as we think about the small things that you said that we can do and the big things that we can do to make the world better. Here at Grace St. Luke's, our own commitments to being a place of healing is something we talk a lot about. Is any small thing we can do, any big thing that we can do, and to think about charity as a part of that. You've given us a lot to consider. So I'm grateful on behalf of the community to welcome you today. And thank you all for coming. Let's give Rick a round of applause.
Thank you all for having me. I genuinely appreciate it. And God bless you. You do wonderful work here.